Okay, so I'm going to be giving you a brief Rhino tutorial today, and we're going to talk about how to do some terrain modeling. So we're going to take essentially terrain in AutoCAD, and we're going to be converting it to landforms. And this kind of form I'm showing you here is a landform I got in one of my first year assignments, and I kind of made them flat lines. But we're not going to do that. You see how each kind of level, it almost looks like a terrace. We're not going to do that. We're actually going to take the contour lines and we're going to make them round and beautiful. I'm just going to kind of give you a sneak peek of what we're going to do. Uh, we're gonna essentially kind of make landforms like this, and the colors are all crazy. But if you go into rendered view, which is like that, we're gonna essentially make a landform like this. So we're gonna take contours from AutoCAD. We're gonna patch them. We're gonna send a road through the terrain, and we're gonna put some trees and some buildings. So it looks complicated, but really it's not. So let's go through some of that. But before we get into actually how to do those details, we'll walk through some of the Rhino interface and the basics. Okay, so let's just jump into Rhino. I have my Miro here as a reminder of things I need to talk about so I don't skip over anything. Let's just go in and start a new project. Let's just close this project. I'm not going to save it. And I'm going to start a new Rhino project from scratch. Here we are. So in Rhino, one of the reasons it might be confusing for a lot of people is because there are 4 viewports you're looking at one time. And when you're working in 3D, it really comes in handy to be using these 4 viewports at one time, because you can get lost in your model really easily. But these 4 viewports will help you stay oriented relative to the objects in your model. And we'll get into using how I use all 4 viewports kind of at the same time when I do modeling. So just think about that. Another thing is you're all used to AutoCAD, which is great. Like AutoCAD, there's a command line here in Rhino. So if you don't know where a button is in the menu, you can just type it in. For example, I wanna draw a box. So I'm gonna just type in box. So the command line prompts me with the next steps for drawing that box. So it's like select first point. I'm going to put the first point here. Select other corner. I'm going to put it here. Select box height. I'm going to put it here. And then here we go. I have my box. And as you can see, I drew the box in one. I started drawing the box in the top viewport until I started making it 3D. Then I just moved my mouse over to the perspective viewport and I drew the top end of the box. So as you can see, I'm already working in 2 different viewports at one time. The next thing I'd like to show you is when you're in perspective, when you're in like any of these viewports, you can change how you view the objects in your viewports. Right now it's a wireframe, which is helpful when you're just doing line work. But once you start bringing in surfaces and objects that are 3D into your model, you want to start using things like shaded or rendered, right? Rendered gives you that plaster-like effect, and you can put material overlays on these rendered objects to give, and Rhino like really gives you a nice feeling of light and shadow once you start using these rendered objects. I like to use ghosted because then you see like the line work and you see the surfaces. So anyway, I'm just showing you that there's all these options to view your viewports by. You can also set the view for each viewport. For example, I'm in perspective right now. You can change it to top, front, back, perspective, isometric. I'll get into the isometric section later. I'll show you why that's useful. Okay, so now let's talk about the types of objects that you can create in Rhino. Like I showed you here, this is a poly surface object. So it's a surface, but there's multiple surfaces composed together, so it's a poly surface object. Another type of object is a simple point, right? So now in my model here, I have this one simple point. Another object is line or curve or polyline. Rhino is great at curves. Like if you know how to use like SketchUp, you know that doing curves in SketchUp, at least when I was doing it, was kind of hard. to do, but in Rhino, it uses really powerful math to figure out curve calculations. So you can draw curves in Rhino, dots, surfaces, and polysurfaces. Here, I'm going to just show you a single surface. Let's just type in rectangle, and I can just draw a rectangle there. And so actually, this rectangle, it's not a surface; it's just a series of lines. If I want to put a surface into that, I can type patch, enter. And you can see the different patch parameters. I put a 20 by 20 grid here, so you know it's showing you that grid. There's so many ways to draw surfaces, right? In Rhino, not just patch. You can also use planar surface, planar surface, enter, and then you have a really simple surface in here. So there we have it. We have surfaces, we have lines, we have dots, and we have polysurfaces. So that's great. Next thing we're going to talk about is, let me bring actually the objects back. Next thing we're going to talk about is some of these tools at the top. Ortho, grid snap. These are kind of self-explanatory. Grid snap means when you're drawing a line, for example, so let's type in polyline. Polyline. When you use grid snap, my dot here is snapping to all the grids in the microgrid here. When I turn it off, I can put a dot kind of anywhere, my second dot. It's just kind of free form. Ortho keeps my lines to 0, 90, 180, 360 degrees, and 270 or whatever the other one is. Anyway, it keeps it to like the right angles. And then the other ones you'll get used to using history, planar, smart track. Just like play with them yourself. You'll get used to them. The only other one I want to mention here is the gumball. And now, so you can see gumball is turned on. I'm going to turn ortho off and grid snap back on. Gumball is on, and what gumball is that like tricolored red, green, blue feature here that's sitting on top of the surface that I have highlighted. And what that lets me do is control my feature in 3D in fixed ways. So if I click on the red, I can drag my object along the red plane. If I click on the green, I can drag my object along the green plane. So it helps me fix the movement of these items. And you can see the little grid here. This grid helps me move. You can see the grid is in red and blue. This grid helps me move this object in the red and blue axis only. And then there's a couple more things in the gumball. For example, these kind of arches here. These arches help me rotate my object by that axis only. So I rotate it by the green axis. Now I can rotate it by the red axis, and I can rotate it by the blue axis. So it just helps me manipulate my objects in 3D really easily. I love the gumball tool. I always use it, and you'll see as I'm doing this tutorial, you'll see how I use it. And then the last thing on here that we can show you right now are these little colored squares. So this is a blue square. If I click and drag on that blue square, it increases the height of my object. If I click on the red square, it increases the width. And if I click on the green square, it increases the depth. So that's another really easy way using these squares to manipulate your objects. Right? Makes sense. Okay, let's delete that now. I think that's everything we need to show here. So let's go ahead and delete that. And if you click on an object and you don't have the gumball turned on, that's because your gumball icon up here isn't selected. And on PCs, the gumball icon might be at the bottom here somewhere. You know, the interface is slightly different, but the tools are all the same. Okay, let's delete that. One more thing I want to show you while we're here is, let's go into the units in the model. It's always good to make sure that you're working in the right units. As you know, in AutoCAD, if you work in the wrong units, it just messes you up. You don't want that. So go into units. I'm going to work in meters. That's fine. Everything else looks great. Another thing is when you want to render later on, when you're finished your model, you can change the rendered settings here in the render button beside units. And there's a whole bunch of options. You can change the lighting, you can change the color, you can change the background color, you can change the viewport you're going to export and all that. And this helps you export really high resolution 3D models. But be careful about these settings because the higher your resolution, the longer it's going to take. Another thing you should be careful about is don't press this render button up here, or type in render into the command line until you've gone in and controlled your settings and set your settings for how you want it to render, because sometimes it may take ages to render if your settings are all off. Last thing I'll show you in here is you can actually change the grids that are showing up. I have a major grid a minor grid every 1 meter and a major grid every 10 meters. Because I like to use grid snap, I like to make sure that these grids are set up nicely. You can have a major line every 20 meters as an example. And you can see the grids in the background changed. So every 10 little squares is a big square. Let's change it back to 10 though. There we go. Okay, let's get started with drawing some terrain. Does anybody have questions? I'm just going to pull up in the chat. No. All right, now we're going to bring in some lines, contour lines from AutoCAD, and we're going to start shaping landforms. So to do that, I already have my AutoCAD line work and my contours set up, and I assume that a lot of you guys will too, whether you're getting this line work from CADMapper or you have it from elsewhere. It's really easy to bring in line work into Rhino. So I'm going to go into File, Import, and I'm going to choose my terrain modeling DWG AutoCAD file, and I'm going to open it. These layers are okay. I'm gonna just accept it as is. And you can see here now is my line work. So these are my contour lines, and then the other colors are the trees and the buildings and the roads. So that's great. I'm not using these layers. Just like AutoCAD and Adobe Illustrator, you really want to make sure you're using your layers properly. It really helps you organize your model. For example, the materials you use when you render are all managed through layers. That's the best way to do it. So I highly advise you to properly organize your layers. And I'm going to color code my layers too. So while I'm in my layers panel down here at the bottom right-hand corner, I'm going to change the contour color to aquamarine. I'm going to change the road color by clicking on this black dot. Right now the roads are black. I'm going to change the roads to blue. So, you know, and I'm going to change the trees to green just because they're trees. Great. And I'll leave the buildings black. And then you'll see this blue little dot here. This blue dot tells you which layer we're drawing in right now. So since I'm going to be working with the contours first, I'm going to select the contour layer. And then also you can, like AutoCAD and other tools, you can turn on and off layers by using the light bulb. So I'm going to turn everything off except the contours, and I'm going to lock. You can also lock layers. Since things are turned off, I'm not going to lock things right now. Okay, great. Let's go in and start doing things to these contours to turn them into 3D. As you can see, let's actually turn labels back on. You can see I have the label on each contour line, so I know what elevation it is. And I can see that they're at 1 meter intervals apart. So that's good to know. And hopefully you have that information too in your contours. Now I'm going to start lifting them up into 3D. You can see they're all on a flat surface right now. But in reality, we don't want a flat surface. We want representative terrain. So this is where the gumball is going to come in handy. Make sure my gumball is on. This is a little bit manual and laborious, but it really is quite easy to do. And I'll show you how. So in my top view, I'm going to just click on the first contour line. And since they're 1 meter elevation apart, I'm going to just click on the blue arrow and just type in 1. And that moves the contour up by 1 meter. And you can see that contour move up in the right view by 1 grid, which is 1 meter. This next one, I'm going to move up by 2, right? This next one, I'm going to move up by 3. Now be careful here. It's hard to choose lines in perspective. It's actually easier to choose these lines in the top view, right? But in the top view, I can't bring that line up because I don't have a blue arrow here. I can only bring it to the north or to the south or east and west. I can't bring it up in the Z direction. So I have to use the perspective to bring it up. So that one needs to go up by 4, enter. This one needs to go up by 5, right? This one needs to go up by 6. And just bear with me, I'm going to do them all. It's going to go pretty quickly though. And if this was an actual YouTube tutorial, this is where they'd speed it up. And line work from different. One more warning, while you're bringing in line work from different softwares that you didn't draw natively in Rhino, you want to be careful that your line work is cohesive and your lines connect. You can see how I was bringing up lines. I brought up this line just now. It's in the right place, but that contour actually gets cut off in 2 spots. So I need to select both of these and move both of these up also to the right place, which is, I think, 10. And then now I'm going to select everything in contour 10 and I'm going to hit join because I want them to all be together, right? So just double check. Don't just assume your line work is correct just because you got it from a generally reliable source. There are mistakes in data all the time. Okay, let's just keep going. 12, 13, 14, 15. Kind of fun after a while. 16, 17, 18. There's only 23 of them, so it's not going to be much longer. 19, 20, 21. Hopefully you're not doing a mountainous region with tons and tons of contours. But if you are, your contour intervals are probably going to be greater. So maybe it's okay. 23. 24. And that's 23. And that's 24. I think 24. Okay, so I ended up. And then here, that one too needs to come up. Right? Anything still at the bottom? No, everything's lifted up. This one's lifted up into the wrong place. This one needs to be down here, I believe. Just zoom in, make sure it's in the right place. Yeah, that looks like it's in the right place. And then also you see I skipped a line here. I got too excited. So let me select all of these contours here. And you can see it when I select from the left to the right. And I release, I can't select anything actually, because I need to select my entire object for it to be in the selection from left to right. But if I select from right to left, I can only partially highlight everything, and everything that's partially selected is in that selection. So I'm going to move it down. Okay, so it looks like now things are in the right place. And actually this line could go up one more. Yeah, it looks like everything's in the right place. Great. So now you've taken your contours and you've made them 3D, and you can start to see your landforms shaping up here, which is wonderful. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put a surface on top of this, which is really important for us to be manipulating into 3D. Okay, so see here, what I did that was wrong. What did I do that was wrong? I brought this line work. I used the green arrow to bring it up. I need to actually bring it back down into the right place here. That's why when you're working in multiple viewports, you really need to make sure your objects are in the right place. And actually working in these multiple viewports help you kind of make sure everything's right. And just like always navigate around your model, make sure things aren't floating. Okay, great. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up my top viewport a little bit more. The next tool I'm going to use is called Patch. And what Patch does, it takes into consideration all the line work that I bring into Patch. And I find Patch works best when it's in a fully enclosed box. So I'm going to type in rectangle. And I'm going to just kind of draw this bounding box around the model like this. Done. Easy peasy. Boxes on the ground. Great. I'm just going to highlight everything now in my perspective view. And I'm going to type in patch. You can play with these numbers. I think this is the default one, 2021. Let's just go with that for now and see. Okay, that's pretty good. You can see now I have this like surface that really closely resembles the line work that I added into the model. Really beautiful, right? Really great. I'm happy with that. Let's live with it. You'll also notice that because of my rectangle, the object goes beyond the contours. So a little bit later, before my model is finished, I'm going to make sure that I clip out all the areas that don't belong. So we're just looking at landform that is accurate of my line work here. Okay, great. So that was really easy, right? It was just one command to take you from your contours in the correct elevation to the landform. And again, that command was patch. Wonderful. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just do a little quick reminder that I can change the way I view this object. It's in perspective right now. I'm gonna actually put it into ghosted so that I can see the model, but I'm also going to turn on the roads. Here I have my roads, right? So I can see them underneath. They're sitting underneath, but I can see them clearly in my line work in my top view because I'm in wireframe still. And the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to select both of these two lines and use a tool called Loft. And Loft is a really great tool because it draws a surface in between two lines. So when I have two kind of irregular lines that are on the same elevation or on different elevations, I'll use Loft. Enter. Great. And then now I'll go into shaded in this view too. Actually, I'll go into ghosted, or let's go into shaded. That's fine. And let's just hide my contours for a moment. Hide contours. Yeah, okay. It looks like the loft didn't work. So let's try it again. Loft. There we go. So loft works now, and you can see the surface was patched. and it's in the right layer. It's under roads, which is great. Let's turn my ghosted view back on, and let's turn the contours layer back on. And let me pan around my model a little bit here. And again, I'm just doing a simple right click on my perspective view to kind of orbit around the model. I'll do it again. Okay, let's get rid of my loft. Let's go back to these two lines. Unselect them. You can select them both and type in loft. And you get this loft options, hit enter. Or you can type in loft before you select them, and it tells you to select the curves once you're in the command itself. And you hit enter and you get loft. So now you have a surface between these two lines. And then while we're here, let's go back into my perspective view. And let's just orbit around so I see a little bit more of my road here. And let's type in extrude surface. So now I can extrude my surface here by that loft surface. I extrude my lofted surface, right? Questions? Okay. So what I've done, I created a surface between two lines through loft, and then I used extrude surface to make that like a 3D object. I'll do that again. So I have my surface selected. I'm going to type in extrude. And if you're familiar with SketchUp, it's kind of a similar thing as SketchUp, extruding, right? Done. Let's delete the surface on the bottom. I don't need it anymore. I still have all my other surfaces, which is great. I have a poly surface. I'm going to turn on my contours, and I'm going to use the gumball to lift this road up. And I want to lift it up so that it's kind of sitting above my terrain here. Right? So here we go. Here's my road. It's sitting above the terrain. It's wonderful. Let's see. It might be too high though, right? You want to make sure your road doesn't, like in the real world, you're not going to see a road that looks like a ribbon like this so high above the terrain, right? So let's do something about that. I'm gonna actually use a tool called Boolean difference, and I'm gonna take away the road from the terrain. Let's just do that. There's a couple ways we can do this, and we can figure out how to better insert that road into the terrain. But before I go there, I'm just going to go to the rendered view really quickly, just so you can actually see what's happening. So now I have this kind of ribbon on my terrain, which is wonderful, right? Okay, let's go back to shaded. And let's type in Boolean difference and select the surfaces. I'm going to select that, hit enter. And there you go. See, it subtracted that surface. So you can take your shapes and use the tool Boolean difference to subtract from other shapes. Let's just step away from the terrain model for a minute and use Boolean difference in another object, because I think it'd be helpful for you guys to illustrate the power of Boolean difference just separately. So let's create a few of these squares, these boxes here. And as you can see, I'm using the gumball tool to duplicate them. I'm holding down my box. I'm holding down Option or Alt on my keyboard, and I'm clicking on the green line and it reproduces it. Then I'm still holding down Alt, and I'm clicking on the red line, clicking and dragging it, and that reproduces that object. And then I'm going to manipulate this object. I'm going to make it long and skinny like that, and I'm going to take this other object, and I'm going to hold down Shift, which then scales that object down in size. And I can bring it to this object here. And I'm going to use Boolean difference to show you how I can subtract one object from another. Okay, so let me just zoom in. Let me just put this image to somewhere I want to subtract it from. Whoops, zoomed in too close. All right, so now I put my one box into my bigger rectangle. It kind of looks like Lego. I'm going to hold down Option. I'm going to duplicate that little box. So now you can see here, whoops, just zoom back in. I have two boxes kind of sitting in my bigger box. I'm going to type in Boolean difference. And it says select surfaces or poly surfaces to subtract from. I want to subtract from this big surface, hit enter. And then now in the command line, it says select surfaces or poly surfaces to subtract with. Okay, I want to select both of these cubes and I'm holding down shift so I can select both and I hit enter. And now I have this object that has that cube carved out of it. So let's go into my rendered view just to see how that looks, right? There you go. So that you can kind of imagine now how you would use Boolean difference to like carve out windows, for example, from a building. So that's great. We'll use Boolean difference again a little bit later. I just wanted to show you that now too. Actually, let's go into shaded view, ghosted view rather. I'm going to show you another tool up here called to zoom selected. So I'm gonna click on this layer here. I'm going to go into this viewport and I'm going to hit this button here, which is zoom to selected. So just because I'm lost in one viewport from an object, but I see the object in another viewport, I click on that viewport in the other object and I click on the viewport I want to be in. And then I click on this button here, zoom selected. You can also use the command line, zoom, enter, and then S. You see how S is underlined here? You can just type in S and it zooms you in to the extent for zoom selected. So pretty cool that you can use the command line and you can also use these buttons as you can with AutoCAD. Okay, so now you saw how I curved away this road from this terrain work. Let's show you how to do it another way. Let me go back in time. Okay, actually, let's do it this way. Let's just delete everything. Do this all over again. Let's turn off my roads. Let's go back to contours, hide my road. Delete that loft, highlight everything and type in patch. Whoops. Highlight everything, type in patch. Hit enter. I have my patch again. Great. Let's turn back on my road. And let's hide the contours for a second. And let's go there again and let's type in loft. Done. Let's move this up into the right place. Let's turn on my contours again, as this is all in the right place. Whoops. Sorry, I selected the wrong thing. I needed to select my surface to bring that back up. Okay, I'm going to show you something else now to carve that road into the land, and that is split. So let's do that. Let's put the road in the right place. Let's use extrude surface to kind of bring that road down into the earth a little bit more. Let's bring it down to about here. And let's use the tool split. Okay, split is really interesting because what split lets you do is it lets you take your object and split it by another object. So I'm going to take this object and I'm going to type in split. And then it says select cutting object. So I'm going to take this object. Whoops. Let me do that again. I'm going to type in split, and I'm going to select the poly surface here to split my road by. So now I have my road here. I can delete that, and as you can see, I only have the bottom half of the road left now. Let's also just move that up a touch. Let's also split this terrain by the road. So let's select the road and type in split. And let's select the terrain, hit enter. Whoops. You have to make sure you're following the command line, right? And I wasn't that time. So let's type in split. Let's select the road, which is here. Hit enter. Select object to split. Enter. Let me try one more time. Split. Select object to split. The terrain. Enter. Select cutting object. The road. Enter. Now I can actually, whoops. You can see how there's like the road has been cut out of the terrain, right? So that's pretty cool. Okay, so there's lots of ways to do that, as you can see. Another thing I'm going to do, that's like a really deep gouge, right? It's not actually going to be that deep of a gouge. So you actually want to use extrude surface to bring that road back up to where it's a little bit closer to the top. And let's bring it back up by, let's say 5 meters. I'm just going to type in, or 4 meters. And that seems about right there. So see that? Now I have this kind of road embedded into the earth here. And anywhere where the road is above the earth, my road is already still above, but also in areas where the terrain is too high, I use the road to kind of cut into the terrain. So you can do it that way. Now I'm also going to show you how to use materials here. So if we go back into the shaded or the rendered view, you can see how the road is kind of cut in. But I want to use a different material for my road than the terrain. For example, in the terrain, where the contours, the circle button helps me control the materials. So I want to change that to say, to like aquamarine as an example. Done, apply. That now my terrain's aquamarine. I wouldn't necessarily choose this color for your models, keep it really simple. But if I want to change the road color now, I double click the circle icon here, and I change my color to dark gray or even black, apply, and then I get a dark road. Again, black is too dark. So I think maybe like a dark gray is probably a little bit better for the road. And that's probably even too dark still. So let's go even lighter with a gray. Let's actually just choose light gray. There we have my road now. Okay. So there's that. Next thing I'm going to do is, because this landform is like very large, right? I only want a small section of it. I don't want it all. And I also remember that the landform extends beyond the contours, which are not right. So I want to actually like clip that landform down. But before I do that, any questions? Tim raised his hand. You have a question, Tim? There's a couple ways you can do that. You can just, one way is like extrude surface, choose your bottom surface and just bring it back up.
Yeah. Is there a way to get like a surface that follows? Because you know how like after you've split your road, it's no longer level, like to get a surface that follows, how to describe that? Do you know what I mean? Like a surface that follows the top, that's like changing in elevation as well?
Yeah, that's where like the commands like project and flow along surface.
Okay.
If you want to actually make it follow through, that's where that could help.
And cap, no, or no?
Well, yeah, cap could work too if you want to just put a line above the top. And the other one too that could work again is loft. Right, so I just select both of those lines, select that polysurface edge and that polysurface edge. And then I have my lofted lines. Oh, yeah, I might have selected the wrong lines, but if you you can also use another tool called dupe edge to like separate out that polysurface edge. Right, so now I have a distinct item here, polysurface edge.
And then last question, I'm just curious, when you're doing that selection and you're like picking between the different stacked objects, how is that working?
Picking between the stacked objects.
Like how it gives you the two options there.
Yeah, so you can see how, do you see the pink lines? So when I have the surface selected, that's that pink line that's highlighted. And if I select polysurface, that's this pink line. So just because there's like layered objects one on top of another, when you click, you're selecting kind of both, and you have to decide which one of those you want to select.
Gotcha. Oh,
Yeah.
I see. Okay. I
Yeah,
had
so
my other layer off, and so I didn't have layered. Okay. Thanks.
Oh yeah, no problem. Okay, let's do that a little bit for our road, for our terrain here. Like if you want to play with the terrain a little bit, let's just type in points on. Right, so you can see the points are, it's a little hard to see because of the color, so I'm going to change the color to something a little bit more obvious, which is red. You can see all my points are on now. And you can actually use these points to manipulate your terrain even more, right? So you can see how that kind of lifts up things. But be careful, because since I've carved out another object into this object, there's that gap there. So watch out for stuff like that. And then same thing, like Nadia was saying with the lines, we go into shaded, and I go into, I'm going to just draw a curve. Enter, I select the curve, it has all these dots. You can actually manipulate the curve again with those dots. And if the dots are annoying, for example, these dots are pretty annoying here. If you want them to disappear, just go to points off. Dots are gone. So that's that. Any more questions? And if not, it's probably a good time for a break.
Let's take a quick break.
Go back to the. Okay, great. So let's go back to what we had here. We had our road cutting through the terrain model, which is great. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to draw some vegetation, and we're going to draw some buildings, and we're going to start placing them on this model, and then we'll start setting that up for export. Now, before we actually get to do that, I just wanted to show you how to do one thing, right? Because this model, like we spoke about, this model, the edges of it aren't actually, they're not accurate because we created a bounding box that was a little bit too large. So we actually want to clip this model by a smaller area. I'm just going to move it up into the right place. Let's delete this other model, which is in the way. Let's move this up into the right place here, which is about there, and move it kind of back towards the center. Okay, great. And again, like all other tools, you can press Command A or Control A and select everything in your view here that selects it all. It's just nice how all the commands and keys shortcuts kind of transfer between software. So if you think you know a command that transfers, like try it, it probably does. Okay, anyway, let's go back to clipping this terrain model here. Let us use a box to do it. So box, first corner of the base. Let me actually start in the top view. So I'll make my first corner here, and I'll make my second corner kind of, let's go a little bit smaller actually. Let's go box again, start here, and go to about here. And let's make my height, let's go back to the perspective view and bring my height. Maybe you can even type, let's type in just 30 into here. So now we have this box, and we're actually going to clip our model by this box, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Let's move this down a little bit though to about there, and let's make sure, let's create a new layer, which is the clipping box. Just to keep things a little bit organized, and let's move things kind of back to that clipping box. Okay, this is what we're going to do for this model here. We're gonna split this box. So we're going to type in split by the landform, enter. Okay, you can see it didn't split. And that is because these lines here it's because there's so many different layers in here. It actually didn't know what to split it by. So let's just try one thing. Let's just try making this a little bit longer, just to go outside the road area, and let's try splitting it again to see if it works. Split. If not, we might need to do something else. Cutting object, hit enter. Delete. Okay, so that worked, which is good. So you just, before you split all the way, you need to like kind of rationalize these, because they're all in different layers. There was no one cohesive layer that it could split it by. So it needed you to kind of set that cohesive plane for the split. Another thing we can split is the terrain model itself. So let's select the terrain model and type in split. Select cutting object. The cutting object is going to be the bottom of my clipping box here. Hit enter. So now our terrain model, the outside edges can be split. So now you can see our terrain model kind of sits on this neat little plane here. Now you see these edges here. That's because they're two different objects. So to get around doing that, you'd have to join these objects. So they're one object, and you can use the tool join, or you can use the tool Boolean union to kind of bring everything that are the same object into one object. So you can do that. And then see how the clipping box is not the same color. You can also like change the color of the layer for the clipping box. You can make that aquamarine if you want. Either way, you can do it however you want. The more important thing versus the colors in your model are the colors when you actually render it and take it out of your model. Okay. And again, let's make my road a darker gray. So I'm going into my materials palette. And again, I got there by clicking on the circle icon in my layers area next to the road layer, and I hit apply, and then the road turns darker. Okay, so I think the next thing we can do are draw trees and buildings and start placing them onto the terrain here. So let's go back into my ghosted view and kind of just like leave this terrain model for now and just go off to the side. We can move things into it later. You could recall the Boolean difference tool that I used to carve out windows and building into buildings. Let's do a little bit of that now. All right. So I like to, when I draw buildings, I like to just kind of do it off the side and start in 2D, lift the building into 3D, and then move it into the right place. So let's do that by just starting with polyline. Start my polyline, first line, second line, and I'm going to do an A-frame peak roof here. Third line, fourth line, fifth line, sixth line. I select that and I type in planar surface. Right, and then I go here, I go to perspective and I click on the zoom to. So now I see this view of my perspective, right? And I type in extrude surface. And then I use the gumball tool. Oops, let's delete that. We don't need that. Let's select the object itself. Use the gumball tool to rotate the object. And I'm holding shift down, and shift helps me keep my object along the planars. Okay, and so let's actually move this into the right layer. Let's move this into the building layer, and let's turn the building layer on. And there you go. I have my first building, which I can kind of nest anywhere onto the landscape. And this is where you want to be careful, right? Because you move the building and you think it's on the landscape, but it's actually not. You rotate around and you realize it's floating in the middle of the sky. So there's a couple ways you can do it. You can use the top and the right views to move things into the right place, as I'm kind of doing here. And I go to the front view and I'm like, okay, it's still floating. So I just want to move it here. And then I go back and I look and I'm like, okay, that's almost in the right place, right? It's almost sitting on the terrain model, but not quite, but it's getting close. So I can actually just like be in perspective now and kind of put it into the right place. You can kind of nestle it in where it belongs. And I drew this house a little bit large. Make sure when you're drawing, you actually draw to scale, right? So kind of put it in the right place where you want it. And again, because we have grid snap on, it's snapping to the grid. If I want to turn it off, I can kind of freeform and manipulate where that house should go exactly relative to my model. Okay, so now you want to do a second house. Maybe it's the same dimensions, maybe it's not. Let's just assume it is the same dimensions for now. You can again just press Command or Option and use the drag, use the gumball to drag your object around, and then suddenly you've multiplied your object in space. So that's fun. That's kind of a nice feature to have. And again, we can rotate it. You can kind of do whatever you want with that object with the gumball. Okay, so we have our little houses now, and let's go back to our rendered view to see how that looks. Okay, kind of looks like a pastoral little community here. And again, remember the Boolean difference tool I used? You can start to carve out windows and doors into this into this house. And again, before you would actually place them on the landscape, I'd go do that. And just a little quick reminder on how to do that. Let's actually just go back here and let's type it. Let's just carve out a door and a window out of this house. So let's type in planar surface. Go back to perspective. Zoom to that surface in my perspective view. Type in extrude. Extrude that surface. Rotate it so it's in the right place. I don't need that. Rotate the object so it's in the right place. Okay, and let's reproduce this object and use these tools to manipulate it. Like that, like that, like that. You know, whatever you want to carve out of this main building here. Put it into the right place where you want to carve it out. And type in Boolean difference. Follow direction, select surfaces or polysurfaces to subtract from this main shape. So select polysurfaces to subtract with, select that main doorway, hit enter. And then here you have a little doorway in that house. I'm just going to show you this building here that I kind of drew with Boolean difference too. So you can actually do multiple windows, a doorway, and I'm going to show you one more command, which would be really helpful for you to know here. In this case, let's just shrink this really small, right? Whoops, not that small, a little bit smaller than that. And then use the command array. Enter. Number in the X direction, let's do like 4 of them. Number in the Y direction, 0. Number in the, 1, of course. Number in the Z direction, let's do 3. Enter. Click on base point. Click on next point. Okay, so here I didn't do the parameters right, so we're gonna try that again. And this is the thing with Rhino. You just, if it doesn't go well the first time, just try again. It'll go fine the second time or the third time. You just got to figure out how to work the commands. So let's type in array again. Array. Let's try number in X direction 1, number in Y direction. Let's try 2, number in Z direction. Let's try 2. Hit enter. First point. Second point. So you can see it reproduced it this way. That's fine. Let's just move this out of the way. Play with the parameters, you'll get it right. But for now, you know, we have these here, which we can then move into the main building. And let's use Boolean difference on those 4 objects at once. Type in Boolean difference. Select surface to subtract from. You want to subtract from this. Select surfaces to subtract with. You want to subtract these guys, which you've just reproduced using the array function. Hit enter. And then, you know, you have multiple now kind of cavities or excavations in this building. Again, I'd work on your buildings before moving them onto the terrain. Just because it's nice to work with the orthos and the grid snaps and all that along the axis directions in Rhino before you start moving things off axis in your model. So that's one recommendation. Okay, the next thing I'd like to do is show you how to make some trees for your model, and I'm going to show you how to make deciduous trees and coniferous trees, not carnivorous trees. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. I like to use the cone or the pyramid tool. Let's use cone. Cone, basically just draw a cone and then turn grid snap on. I'm going to draw the first point of the cone, second point of the cone. Actually, let's turn grid snap off. Third point of the cone. Enter. Okay, so I have kind of what I imagine to be like a tree trunk. And again, let's use our layers properly. I'm not doing the greatest job of using layers properly in this tutorial, but I highly recommend you use your layers properly, and I'll show you why when I show you how to do the exploded axo at the very end. But let's call this trees. Okay, we already have a trees layer. Great. Let's move this to the trees layer. Wonderful. Let's turn the trees layer on, and it's green because we set it that way at the beginning, which is great. Okay, let's first make a conifer. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to hold down Alt, and I'm going to use the up arrow to duplicate it. And then I'm going to zoom in a little bit and grab onto one of these square icons in the gumball and pull it out. So now you see when I pull it out like this, my tree, like it pulls it out in the green direction only, which is the Y direction. So if I hold down Shift, it pulls it out in all 4 directions, which I also don't want. So I'll just have to pull it out in the green direction and then pull it out in the kind of red direction. And then you can also specify the scale factor. So I want to scale it by 0.25, and that scaled it down. You can also scale it up, but I'll just use the gumball function for now. Okay, so that might be enough for your conifer. If you have a ton of your trees in the model, I suggest your trees have as little detail as possible, just so you can let the landform underneath really shine. But if you want to add more detail to your conifers, you can even just like add layers. Hold down Alt. Hold down Alt as you pull up your next layer, and you can kind of manipulate that and create another layer to your conifer. And you can kind of do it as many times as you want, but again, could try and keep it simple, right? And it's kind of fun to have things a little funky. I like making things a little funky to just have them stand out a little bit, as in they're not like perfect circles. It's kind of up to you how you want to do it. Okay, let's group this. And let's try the array function again one more time. Array, number in the X direction. Okay, let's try 3. Number in the Y direction. Let's try 3, hit enter. Number in the Z direction, we only want 1. First point at the base of the tree, and then second points out. Enter. Trees in the forest don't really grow in perfect rows, so you can kind of manipulate their sizes and their placement a little bit more. And again, trees also don't grow the exact same size, so I'd encourage you to make trees smaller or larger, and just have some like variation of tree age and placement in your forest. And then you can move them onto the model the same way that you moved the houses onto the model. Okay, so that's the coniferous trees. Let's do a couple deciduous trees. Now, deciduous trees, again, you can do a couple different ways. I like to do my deciduous trees without big fat leafy canopies, because I find, especially in smaller urban sites, if you do a big leafy canopy in your model, that's going to take away from the landscape itself, right? Which you can work around by playing with like transparencies and stuff. But also I tend to just model my deciduous trees as they are in winter. And I also like to use that as a sticking point for like why we don't design for winter first. For you guys who are like really into plants and stuff, like Pete Adolf and his garden designs, he thinks about winter first. And when we're designing cities and landscapes, I think we should think about winter first too. Okay, anyway, get off my high horse and show you how to make a deciduous tree in Rhino. Let's make sure it's in the right layer. So deciduous trees just have like one kind of branch for now. And we'll just take that one trunk and we'll make it smaller. And we'll create a branching structure out of that main trunk. So I'm going to hold down Alt. I'm going to duplicate that. Whoops. I'm going to hold down Alt and I'm going to duplicate that tree trunk, and I'm going to just make it smaller and skinnier. And I'm going to rotate it. And I'm going to just kind of put it into the right place. So again, you're working in 3D. You don't exactly know where things are always landing. So just orbit around your model and always kind of double check. Okay, see, it's not landed. That's why you want to use other views, like your top view, to bring this into the right place. And then maybe you want to use your right view down here to just zoom in and make sure that the branch is located in the right position you want it to be in. So we're getting close. Yeah, I'd say that's about right. We're getting close, and we can kind of do it again. Hold on Alt. Move this over, rotate it into the right direction wherever you want it. Kind of make it skinnier, however you want, manipulate it around, and move it up or down or wherever you want it really in your model. Maybe I want to go here. Like that. It's up to you how you want it to look. Maybe shrink it a little bit, maybe rotate it a little bit more by the green axis, maybe move it here. And that looks pretty good. And again, let's group that. And then now when you hold down Alt, and you use the gumball, you can reproduce this tree as many times as you want. And again, I'd suggest rotating it and changing the size so you have age diversity in your forest. Okay, if you really wanted to, you could add like a sphere or an ellipsoid as the tree canopy. But like I said, that starts to take up a lot of volume in the space. And it just like completely changes your model. So be careful. Like, of course, in real life, you want a big, beautiful leafy tree canopy, but be careful about how you render it in your model. Like, look at how different that looks versus that. Okay, so now you kind of have a bunch of ways to render this mini landscape here, which is great. You have the tool set now to make buildings. You have the skills now to make trees. You can put a road onto a surface. You can carve your surface up a little bit, and yeah, you can turn an elevation diagram or or rather you can turn your contours into a terrain. So last thing I want to do here is just go back into the rendered view. And hopefully your models look a little bit nicer than this. This is just like a live tutorial, and you're going to have something that's really beautiful. But when you're ready to finally render it and bring it onto your panels or your presentations, again, go to settings, go to render, and legacy Rhino render is fine. It's a little bit faster. You can decide whichever one you want to use. I like to keep things simple. Yeah, that's it. Everything looks good. When you're ready to render, just hit that tool render, and then it'll take you into a different screen. I'm not going to hit it now, but it'll take you into a different screen where you can then export your render into Illustrator or into InDesign or wherever you want. Any questions? You can, for your shrubs, you can also just use like spheres. And just like kind of group a bunch of them together, different sizes. Say you want to do like a boxwood cloud or something, or just kind of like this kind of low mounding shrub. You can put a bunch of these spheres together and make them look like a shrub, in growing out of the ground. Group, and let's bring it onto the model. Kind of like that. And then go back into rendered, and you can kind of see how that could look like a pile of shrubs, or you can even make it like a rock formation. And then last thing I'll show you how to do here is kind of form this like free flowing shape. So let's type in points on. You can see here, you can turn the points on, and you can even, like manipulate these a little bit to make them a little more interesting. And the last thing you can type in is rebuild. And you can give it a bunch of points now, and you can manipulate those points and start making these like funny little shapes. And make them however you want. It just gives you like complete control over the way these shapes function. Be as creative as you want with this. And then to turn up points off again, you just type in points off. Whoops. Points off. Okay, so it started off as shrubs, but of course it doesn't look like shrubs now. Okay, any more questions? All right, next thing I want to show you how to do is I want to show you how to go into like do an axo drawing, axonometric drawing of your model, rather an exploded axonometric drawing. So I have another model that I've done previously, and it's all organized really nicely to do an exploded axon. Because we only have 15 minutes left, I'm gonna just show you the quick way. But before I do that, I want to show you when you're in Rhino and you want to change the background for when you're getting ready to render. Again, just go into settings, go into render, like I showed you previously, and you can change your color to whatever you want. I'm going to keep it white for now. And then I'm also going to, you might have a ground plane. You can keep your ground plane, or you can get rid of your ground plane. Up to you. I've gotten rid of it. And and that's it. And then I have my model here, which is already set up for an exploded axo. But before it was an exploded axo, it looked a lot like this, right? Everything was kind of in the right place on the ground plane. These trees are just sitting up there for whatever reason. That's okay. Let's not worry about it right now. But when you're ready to do an exploded axo, you can lift everything. You can lift everything up. And I would recommend when you're doing your exploded axo, you'd have things you want to have on different layers. Does everyone know what I mean by exploded axo, by the way? Yes. I hope by now.
They do, yes.
Okay. Okay. That's good. I just don't want to assume that. But every layer in your explode axo you should have as a separate layer in Rhino. So for example, furnishings I have all together. And the reason I want to have as a separate layer is because when I want to select everything, in that layer, I can just right click furnishings, hit select objects, and then suddenly I have everything in that layer selected like that. Same with vegetation, same with buildings, right click buildings, select objects. I have now my buildings in that layer selected. Okay, so for our exploded axo, we're going to keep it really simple. We're just going to have 3 layers: the building and the ground planes, the vegetation, and then the site furnishings. So let's actually move these lights from surfaces into furnishings, and let's bring that up to the right place, which is about there. Okay, great. And maybe this should be a furnishing too, the base of the artwork. So let's bring that up to the right place too. And you can see here the furnishings are a different color. They're blue, and that's because in the layer I've assigned a light blue to the furnishings. So color light blue. That's why it's different. Okay, great. And then I showed you how to do an update to the shapes by using the tool rebuild. So I basically just had an elliptical kind of shape, and then I typed in rebuild, and then I typed in points on, and I could manipulate that shape however I wanted to kind of keep making this kind of modern art piece unique. Anyway, let's go back. I just wanted to show you kind of an applicable way to why you would be using points on and rebuild. Okay, now let's type in points off, and a shortcut for points off is just p off. Yeah. Yep. Okay, great. So now let's get ready to export this model into Illustrator to make my axo. When you set up your views, you want to actually, for axos, you want to actually use isometric view, because that fixes your planes. So what that allows me to do is like draw a straight line basically from this bench to the corresponding place along the ground plane for that bench. So it fixes the Z plane, I guess. So you wanna keep it like that. So again, go to your viewport, go to set view, isometric, and whichever one of these makes sense. Okay. Next thing you want to do is actually render this. So you can click the render button up here to render it. But just because this is a quick demo, I'm just showing you. I'm not going to sit here and take the time to render a high quality version. I'm just going to do a quick screenshot. So I'm going to do control whatever it is for your screenshot on your computer. I'm going to do a screenshot like this. I'm going to take that and I'm going to bring it into Illustrator. If I can move my camera panel here, desktop, screenshot, there's my screenshot. I'm going to move it into Illustrator. Okay. That's an Illustrator. My artboard is now in the right place. And then I can kind of just use the line tool to draw a straight line from this bench all the way down to the corresponding place for that bench in my model. So I'm gonna just decrease the stroke of that, make it a little bit skinnier. Now it's too skinny, it disappeared. And then you can also use your stroke tool here to make dashed lines. And that's basically what I would do. If it's not too complex, right? If you start doing it for every single one of these things, maybe your drawing is going to get really complex. So you kind of have to be like tactful with how you show this information. But anyway, it's kind of up to you how you want to do it. So that's how you do an exploded axo in just like a couple minutes. If you have any questions about that, let me know. But it's actually really easy to do if you set up your model properly, especially when it gets down to the layers. Any more questions? Okay, so we can just walk through everything in here. You can change the viewport you want to render out of. I choose my current viewport. You can change the background color. You can even like set a wallpaper here, which I don't recommend doing unless you have a really good reason to. You don't want to distract from your model too much. So I usually just tend to keep it a solid plain color or use a gradient. Yeah, lighting and sun. And let's open this up a little bit more. Okay, here we missed it. It was closed. Resolution and quality. So if you go to resolution and quality, you can actually change the size, the dimensions of the render output. You can change the displays, the pixels per inch. You can make it high quality, low quality, good quality, and do all that here in resolution and quality. Any other questions? Have your object. When you have your object selected in Rhino, you should have this property menu open on the right-hand side that talks about what that object is, and that covers things like the display color, the layer it's in, the line type, print color, etc. If you don't have that open, you might have to go to like Windows and it's just to like open that. You can also, I believe, type in properties, which brings up that window for you if it's not already open.
Okay, great. Yeah, that worked for me. I didn't have it before, but that worked.
Yeah, no problem. Everyone's is kind of set up all differently.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions?
Hi there, I just have a quick question. I know your model's not to scale per se, but like if you're trying to figure out like the scale of like a tree, is there like a place you'd find like your dimensions when you're actually trying to do it to scale? Like,
Yeah.
how do you find that in here?
So first of all, I'd try drawing it to scale in the first place. Like that's why my units were set up right in meters. And then that way, when I was actually drawing, maybe I want a 10-meter tall tree, right? So I draw using this grid here, 10 meters. So that's how I would do it in the first place, to draw to scale. If it's not to scale already, you can use you can use a few different ways to just judge how big things are. You can use, let me just, is it measure or no, dimensions? Measure or dimensions? You have to like measure, what's the command? Usually I like don't have to do this because I try and draw it in the first place into scale. Is there a way to measure what things are?
I forget, Matt, is it distance?
Oh, distance.
Yes.
You're right. Okay, thank you. Distance up, and then you get the distance here at the bottom, how tall that thing you just measured was. Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of commands that are in AutoCAD are similar to commands in Rhino.
Yeah,
And I guess
honestly,
people, yeah, and people like if you have even a drawing and you want to scale it, you could use the scale bar as a reference.
yeah, scaling is really easy too. If you want to rescale, just type in scale, select base point, and just imagine you have your especially if you're in top view, you have your bar chart here, and let's say this is 0, so that's my first point, and that's my second point. But I really want that second point to be in 10, so I just type in 10, hit enter, then my model is scaled up by 10. So it's really quite easy to scale. Again, select scale and use your bar scale. I think Rhino is like the easiest tool to scale in versus AutoCAD and the others. Any more questions?